Hey guys, it's Jay, here with another review video. This episode might be one of my favorites as of right now, due to the interactions later on in the episode. But before we get into it, I'd like to ask if you enjoy the video, leave a like and share with others. Without further ado, onto the vid. The episode begins with Aldrich and Shay conversing. Aldrich expresses gratitude to Shay for accepting Code's request to sit at the head of the first table, as having him be a part of discussions will greatly further their goals. He then expresses concern as he doesn't know what Shay's motives are, though he simply responds to this by saying them, which is in reference to the other wolf cubs. He says what matters to him means more than his very own life, and that he only cares for Code's rule as long as they stay true to their purpose, further adding that his motives do not concern Code itself, but he will play along as it means their benefit. Aldrich likens these desires to the passion of the Heart Clan, as he, like them, is doing anything to ensure the safety of the members of his wolf pack. He then says they will all be assigned to Trinidad and return tonight, and that only Shay and Anton will remain in Japan. In regards to Anton, he says that if Anton accepts the request, his training will begin, as the ordained judgment seal cannot be performed until they form a bond with the new 7th head. But as for Shay, he will retrieve one of their lost assets. Shay then asks about Andrea, as he says she hasn't answered her calls. Aldrich says that she left Code and denounced her rank, as a fight with Goro was more than a defeat for her, as she believes she dishonored the family name. He says that officially she is in a rehab center in Kyoto, but unofficially she checked herself out 2 weeks ago and is staying with her mother in Shinjuku. Shay proceeds to leave, but Aldrich says that he doesn't expect her to return, and that he must let her know she did not fail, and that whether she chooses to fight alongside them in this war or not, Code will stand by her. As Shay leaves, Mikhail enters, and Aldrich asks him what God has shown him, as he cannot hide his concern, and that he will not live in a world where he outlives his sister's son. Mikhail simply smiles at this, and says he cannot tell him what he has seen, for it will overcome him with great fear, but what he can share is a phrase he has heard repeated since the moment he stood before Shay, which is the Rod of Men. The episode then transitions to 6:15 in Shinjuku, Japan. Shay enters a shop and is greeted by Demaya Thomas, who initially doesn't recognize him, but when she actually looks up, she has a quick flash of a memory of Shay as an infant with his mother. Shay says good morning and apologizes as he failed to protect her. She holds Shay's face and says that Jamie was right and that he looks just like them, but he clearly took after his mother. She then says she understands why all Andrea does is talk about Shay, as he's more than just handsome, he's also a truly kind boy. She then brings his head in and says Andrea is a warrior and that her wounds are a product of the profession she has chosen, so Shay owes her no apology. Shay then asks if Andrea is here, and Demaya responds that she is in the dining area, and adds that she hopes Shay's presence will do her some good, as she avoids any contact with others as much as she can. Shay then says it was a pleasure to meet her, and excuses himself, but before he can, Demaya offers wisdom. She says spring water is a new life to a wilting flower, but to leaves scorched by the sun, no amount of water can restore. She says soft words may return Andrea to her former glory and heal her wounds, but the scars will forever burn. We then transition to Shay entering where Andrea is at, as we see Andrea is a shell of her former self. Shay stepping forward makes the floor creak, which alerts Andrea to his presence. They both then apologize at the same time. Shay says it's good to see her and that he called, but Andrea says she must have missed them and that it was nice catching up, but he can go now. Shay then places his hand on Andrea's shoulder, but she violently shrugs it off. She then turns and screams out, "Enough, you've seen what you came to see. There's nothing good left here. This place is for wasted warriors to be left alone. You do not belong here. It's bad enough having you see me like this. Now go. I do not need your pity." Shay simply stares at Andrea, who stands up and gets in his face and continues her tirade, asking why he's still here and that the person he's looking for is dead. She continues by saying she died in the battle the moment she lost. When faith is put into a Thomas, that faith is supposed to be certain. It was my task to secure that location and I failed. She says the granddaughter of the great Leo Thomas is expected to measure up to the mark he set, and that she should have known she would never make it, and that all of them watched as she grasped for the air like a fool. She asks how could she go on like this, and what security can she offer anyone? Also saying Leo would have never failed a task like that, and that he gave people hope and peace with his power, and that they wouldn't worry knowing he was around. As she sobs, she says Goro was so strong, and that she never stood a chance. She says she used everything she taught herself over the years, but he wouldn't go down. She asks Shay why he even came here, as no one was supposed to see her like this. She says she thought her will was stronger, but look how fragile she is, and that she's ashamed of herself, and that she can't live up to her name as it's far too heavy. She says she can't bear to stand before the other members of the wolf pack, and asks what good is a broken sword. She finishes by asking if she is the shame of the Thomas family. Shay begins to comfort Andrea as he tells her she took on a god tier level opponent head on and lived, adding that it took the remaining army to take him down, yet she survived alone, and saying if that is not power he doesn't know what is. He says he should have never let that happen, and that all who fell that day did as a result of him not expressing a power he ought to have. He says Andrea's scar he takes as his own, and from this day forward she will never face an opponent such as that again, as he will kill them before they see light. Andrea then blushes as Shay pulls out a ring as he says, "And with this I vow it. From now on I will guard your life with my very soul." He continues the vow by saying, "If you stand with me as my own, I promise to keep your blade sharp as you sharpen mine. And if the weight of the name is too much for you to bear, allow me to remove that burden from you." He says Andrea's hands are for battle, so he will not place the ring there, placing it in her hair instead. Andrea then asks if Shay isn't ashamed of her, and will she not slow him down, but he responds that her fight is now his fight, and if they come to a wall, they will break it down together. He then says he does not want the best parts of her, that he does not desire what they say she's capable of, or what others claim her virtue to be, nor does he yearn for the inward power to overcome weakness she possesses. He does not desire that at his side stands a woman who can cut down his foes, but what Shay truly desires is all of Andrea. This confession of feeling leads Andrea to kiss Shay. However, as they kiss, someone seems to be on the move, and it is noted that they cannot keep up with him as he's moving at light speed, and he can barely be seen. It was also said that he has already crossed India. Aldrich demands someone get eyes on this entity and asks where he's heading, and he is told it is coming to Tokyo. We then see a large crash outside of Demaya's restaurant. This leaves them all outside with Andrea asking if her mother is okay. Shay then looks upward as Kevin Morales now stands before them. Now onto the highlights. First I want to talk about Shay and Aldrich's interaction. Shay says he only cares for Code's rule as long as they stay true to their purpose, which can be to eventually take down Thanatos and to foster peace between humans and Chemios. I think this, along with his following line, is a part of the foreshadowing of Shay eventually turning on Code and becoming Ronin. We know that in the Season 2 premiere, Shay is the #1 on their most wanted list, and that he is actively taking out KCG squads. So it would make sense by the time Shay is Ronin, Code has sort of fallen from grace as well, and Shay can fully say to himself that his motives no longer align with the way Code operates. Depending on how this season goes will really show why Shay is eventually not associated with Code, but I feel like this line only foreshadows the eventual cut ties between them. Aldrich also tells Shay that the Wolf Cubs will be returning to Trinidad, and we know that the early season team-ups are going to be Tevin and Lewis, with Yukiko being with Azam, as well as Shay and Andrea being together. The first two pairings are going to be interesting considering we haven't seen that combo yet, especially with the fact that Yukiko is overall new to the Chemio world, so it'll be pretty interesting to see her and Azam be together. I'd also like to see how they interact considering both of their closeness to Joanna. I think Tevin being with Lewis makes sense as well, considering they seemingly have been to be actively training Yukiko themselves, and it would only make sense that they would be training with each other as well. So I'd like to see how they fight as a duo. And as for Shay and Andrea, we have already seen them fight together, as well as fight in close proximity to one another, so this pairing isn't crazy on the surface. However, this pairing has a very interesting thing I'd like to see come out of it, with that being Andrea's eventual use of Noragiri. I feel like no matter how you slice it, Shay will help Andrea tame Noragiri. This could be from a simple confidence boost that him being present gives her, especially with their newfound relationship, but I also think it's just as possible for Shay to simply force Noragiri into submission himself, allowing for Andrea to use the weapon without any fear of being taken over due to Noragiri's newfound fear of Shay. I also think that this leads to the potential of Shay having Noragiri in the future when he is Ronin, due to the fact that something may happen to Andrea this season or early next season, leading Shay to be the only real person who can use Noragiri without fear of it taking over someone. It could also be seen as a memento he got from her, similar to Bjorn and Winter. Lastly, in regards to the Wolfpack, considering the locations they'll be in, any major battles regarding them should be in those places. Next, I want to talk about a couple things that were said during Aldrich and Mikhail's conversation. Aldrich asks what God has shown Mikhail, and he responds that he cannot tell him what he has seen. This should heavily imply that God gives Mikhail visions directly, and or visions from God are an aspect of Mikhail's talent. Mikhail then refers to Shay as the Rod of Men. Knowing that Ordeal is a biblically in tune story, we can look to the Bible for where this phrase comes from, as well as its potential meaning. This phrase comes from 2 Samuel 7:14, where the passage as a whole is in reference to God speaking to David through the prophet Nathan about David's son Solomon and God's relationship with him. The actual verse itself reads, "I will be his father and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings infected by human hands." That translation comes from the NIV version of the Bible, but in the KJV or the King James version, the phrase rod of men is distinctly used. Here, the rod of men symbolizes human discipline or correction. It suggests that God will use the natural consequences or discipline from human authorities or agents to correct or guide Solomon when he strays from the right path. This reflects a broader biblical theme where God's discipline is sometimes administered through earthly means to teach or guide his people, and it is a reminder of God's involvement in human affairs, and his commitment to guiding us even through challenges towards growth and righteousness. This came directly from the Bible Chat app, and I feel as though it perfectly represents what Shay's purpose in the story will truly be, with that being to finally put an end to Thanatos as he strayed from proper morals unlike his brothers. I would also like to highlight Mikhail has been smiling since the scene started, showing his lack of concern in regards to Shay, as he out of all people know the path Shay will go down. This sort of mirrors Abijah's first time being in Shay's presence, as his chi at the time was comparable to Agaki due to its amount and hostility. However, here, Shay is greatly suppressing his chi, and Mikhail doesn't show any concern for his hostility. Next, there are a few things I want to talk about regarding Shay and Andrea's interaction. So of course, we know there won't be an Andrea versus Shay fight, which kinda sucks, but in reality, this is much better, as this relationship has subtly been building up since the first season, so to get the payoff from it this early is good to see. I also want to quickly add that we still don't know why Shay was late to the meeting, so I'm wondering if what made him late will be relevant or not later on. Now, when Shay enters the area where Andrea was, she doesn't immediately notice him enter until the moment the floor creaks. This to me implies Shay is still greatly suppressing his chi and is potentially using chi shrouding, as Andrea only recognizes the noise and not Shay's chi when she first turns around. Next, I want to highlight that Shay says he takes Andrea's scar as his own. I think this can potentially imply that Shay will lose his arm this season, but specifically he may lose it protecting Andrea, similar to how he lost his eye protecting Tevin. What gives this idea more credence to me is what Bjorn in the past tense told Shay in episode 109. He tells Shay that men ought to be willing to lay down their lives for those they love, and then asks Shay is he. With Andrea being in surgery is what's being shown as these words are said. To me, this can imply and foreshadow that Shay will attempt to protect Andrea in a similar manner to Tevin, but with his entire body, losing his arm in the process, and therefore taking her scar as his own in a literal sense. Moving on to the bigger part of their interaction of Shay proposing to Andrea, Shay proposing isn't just about confessing the feelings that have been there from the start, but it's also about removing the burden she feels her name places on her. This would make her a heart if she does choose to take his name, and would sort of mirror Sabito and Mei, as Sabito being with Mei gave her the feeling of being more than what her talent said she'd be, and here Shay is doing the same thing by allowing Andrea to be herself and more than what her last name says she should be. And lastly, we get to see Kevin Morales once more. Now, I have a feeling like Kevin might have been in Africa during the whole 8-month time skip. I say this due to it being noted that he had crossed India, and if he were still in Africa, he would have to cross through India and China to get to Japan, where Shay and the others are. It should also be noted that it was said he's moving at light speed. This shouldn't be very surprising, as Kevin was able to pull 2 neutron stars apart before returning to Earth in a month's time. This is impressive due to the nearest neutron star being about 400 light years away, give or take 100 light years or 2, and it would take that same amount of time to reach said star. Now, if Kevin did go such a distance and return in only a month's time, he would be multiple times faster than light. We know Rokash should be at least light speed in his state, meaning everyone who ranks higher than him should be at least that fast by proxy. Aside from Kevin's scaling, I'm wondering how the interaction between him and Shay will go. He should know of Leo's death by now, but will he see Shay as a worthy successor to Leo? So here in the outro section, I'm going to start adding my thoughts on the chapter as a whole, as well as parts I really enjoyed. I personally feel like this chapter was shorter than the previous 2, but I think that's due to there being 2 scene changes as opposed to the 3 we had before, though that doesn't take away from the chapter by any means. I really enjoy Brent's use of Mikhail to allude more to God's use of Shay to correct the world, as it helps further show Brent's faith being in the story, as well as how Brent views Shay's character. I also really enjoyed Shay and Andrea's interaction, as it shows more of Andrea's character in a manner we have never seen. So getting to see a character like Andrea express emotional weakness is such a rich experience, considering we've already seen Shay express such an emotion. But anyway, that's the video, guys. Let me know what your favorite part of the chapter was in the comments below, as well as how you feel about the things I mentioned in the highlights section. Don't forget to read the actual episode for yourself, and be sure to like it as well. And I will see y'all in the next one.